Well, welcome again everybody. The very first video in this channel was about a crazy theory me and my friend Arnat came up with. You can check it out, but I will explain it briefly again while explaining this new theory. So, what if I told you there are direct parallels between the Outer Gods of H.P. Lovecraft universe and the Void Lords, and actually the first ones of the Warcraft universe? The stars, a celestial goddess, exiled into the stars. First, I have to admit the fact that I am not an expert on Lovecraft mythos. I have read a bunch of Lovecraft stories, including Cthulhu mythos, the Dream Quest of Unknown Khadat, the Necronomicon, and some more. So, dear Lovecraft experts, forgive me if I make a terrible mistake while explaining this theory, and please correct me in the comments if needed. But I can confidently say that I understood Lovecraft mythos. So, as far as I understand from reading different sources, the Outer Gods were exiled into the stars, with Azathoth as their leader, the dreaming demon sultan. The clear inspirations for names and themes aside, for example Yog-Sothoth and Yog-Saron, or the Black God of the Woods with 1,000 young from Lovecraft universe, and the God of Seven Heads, Visharsh in Warcraft. In my opinion, the Outer Gods being exiled into the outside of the universe to the stars fits perfectly with our first one's Void Lords theory. Long story short, we believe the first ones cared a lot about the Shadowlands and wanted to make sure the afterlives they designed worked properly as how they had intended. Zovaal was their champion and their arbiter, which now has been confirmed, and we have theorized this theory back in March 2021. At some point, the Eternal Ones got greedy and, led by the Primus himself, they abused the anima at their disposal to empower themselves enough to banish Zovaal into the Maw and the first ones into the Void. But the term Void is problematic here because Void actually refers to nothingness, a dark beyond. So let's call it Great Dark Beyond. Sounds familiar? Actually, these connections with the Outer Gods were what inspired us to develop this theory in the first place. So, I have used Wikipage for H.P. Lovecraft universe while I do my research, which I will put into the description below, and while reading about Yog-Sothoth, I read this paragraph. It is heavily implied, if not outright stated, that Yog-Sothoth is omniscient and is locked outside the universe, meaning he can know and see all of space-time all at once, which means there is no secret hidden from Yog-Sothoth. So, let us remember what Unat said about Muzot during Crucible Storm's raids back in DFA.
His eyes behold every truth, every unnumbered crime. His gaze falls upon every path, every dream given form.
And Elun, the celestial goddess, the Lady of Stars, was the only one who managed to interfere with our universe, especially thanks to the Nauru she created, and Zovaal and Yogg-Saron, according to our theory. For a more detailed explanation about everything I just said, please take a look at the video I have mentioned after watching this. So, Let's take a look at some more references to the stars back in Legion, Battle for Azeroth, or even the times of Puzzle Box of Yaxun.
The stars align. Fear their portents.
Have you had the dream again? A black bolt with 7 eyes that watches from the outside, Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. Everywhere you look, the stars gaze back. You know their form already. You have but to listen. Eye of the Corruptor from patch 8.2 Rise of Ashera. Another passage I came across while reading about Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep differs from the other deities in the mythos in a number of ways. Most of the outer gods were exiled into the stars, like Yog-Sothoth and Azathoth, and most of the great old ones are sleeping and dreaming. More than the fact that they are outside of the universe, they were also exiled to the stars. So, as I have just mentioned, after Warcraft Chronicles was published, the term void was actually limited to a simpler meaning in my opinion. But actually, void means nothingness, emptiness, a great dark beyond, just like in our universe. It is the stars, the vast universe which the outer gods, and in this sense the Void Lords, were exiled. So, taking those whispers from Warcraft lore, pointing out to the stars, and their mystery into the account, I believe now we can safely say the Void Lords, the first ones, according to our theory, are locked, exiled, outside of the universe, outside of space, time, and existence. Before getting on to the next part, let's have a look for the Circle of Stars references in recent years and look at them with this new point of view.
Come, heroes, prove yourselves worthy. Find me in the Circle of Stars.
Circle of stars made flesh.
As far as I understood so far, reading and researching about the Lovecraft mythos, the Great Old Ones were just spawns of the Other Gods, an ancient alien race. They landed on Earth, ruled it for an untold time, gathered followers, and created a Black Empire. As Lovecraft mentioned their ancient structures in some of his stories, and when I read the passages back in the day, they reminded me of the Black Empire of Warcraft. Suddenly, after the stars aligned in a different way, they died, or at the least, put into a deep sleep, only to be awakened once again when the stars will realign into the supposed position. Sounds so similar to how the old gods were thrown across the universe by the so-called Void Lords to find Azeroth, their most important prize, doesn't it? We should also point out that the Automa in Zeret Mortis speaks in a musical language, based on symbols, as Steve Denizer himself explained. Actually, this was the sparking point for me to realize the connection with H.P. Lovecraft universe. The other gods dance with the maddening music their followers provide them through drums and flutes. Also, in the court of Azathoth, the lesser demons keep Azathoth asleep by playing flutes all around it until the end of days. Let us remember what Steve Denizer exactly said.
The Automa speak in this kind of musical language. They don't talk the way that we mortals are used to speaking. The sound team was super excited. They jumped in, they started prototyping all kinds of different sounds. We listened, we gave feedback, and we really ended up in a cool place. As you're playing through and gradually unlocking the language, you'll be able to see those words that they're saying, but still hear those tones.
Also, let us remember how the Void Lords were described according to Wikipedia. The Void Lords are monstrous entities composed of pure shadow energy who rule over the void outside the borders of reality. So, what is Elul's role in all of this? Well, we know for sure that Elul is related to the stars and the moon, so the arcane. But according to us, she is the first one, so actually a void goddess who can wield the power of light, void, life, arcane, and death at the same time. Considering the void lords were exiled to the stars just like the outer gods, I guess you can see the references here. A celestial goddess who gazes back every time we gaze into the stars and interfere with the meddling of the eternal ones, the light, order and life as much as she can to pave the path for the return of the true masters. What is the role of Azeroth in all of this? Well, as I have said before, I have actually doubts if Azeroth is actually a titan after all, considering how powerful she is. There is a most likely option for the first wife to have established Zereth Mortis inside Azeroth and hid it inside the veil I spoke of before. If Azeroth is a Titan Word Soul, she is a power battery as well to open the path of the void. But this is where actually Azeroth separates from Azathoth. To preserve the reality, Azathoth must not be awakened and forced to sleep. But Azeroth must be awakened. This is what Zovaal, Sargeras, and the old gods have been trying to do in their own ways to unmake this false reality and open the way outside of the universe, to the void itself. We will talk about what I expect from the ending of the Shadowlands later, but now, thanks for watching and see you on the next one. So,
They will see. Death was never meant to be changed.